O'Hara, so I'm the New South Wales ACT Node Manager, and I also have Catherine Gearing with me today, who I'll introduce in more detail. So we're going to give you a briefing today about the insights into temporary and emergency accommodation. We'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting across a range of different Aboriginal lands today and that we are guests on these lands. I'd like to pay my respect to the elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like us to recognise that these lands and waters are places of teaching, research and learning. And today I'm coming from the Dharawal country down Wollongong Way, and I'd love you to put in the chat, introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. I'd like to also mention the beautiful artwork that I've got up on the screen for you by Leanne Brooke. It's a beautiful piece of work, and it's lovely just to pause for a moment and think about the connections and the importance of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, particularly in this project that we're going to present to you about today. So today, this briefing will provide a more detailed description of the project and the opportunity for the interested parties, yourselves, to pose questions to assist with developing the submissions from our current expression of interest for insights into temporary and emergency accommodation. The answers to the questions asked here will be transcribed and shared on the page under our frequently asked questions for this EOI. But you can ask questions via the chat at any time or by raising your hands. It's an easy flowing, not too formal briefing. The chat is open, use it as much as you like, comments, questions, etc. at any time. We should also have time at the end for verbal question and answers. Most important thing today is that you, the researchers, who are here get to ask the questions and clarify the aspects of the call for expression of interest, that you get a good understanding of what we have in mind for this project and this EOI process, so that you're in a good position to put a solid EOI submission together. We really do appreciate the time and the effort that goes into responses to calls for EOIs. So this is your chance to get what you need from us and to support you in doing that. So today we're going to have a brief introduction, talk about NHRA, the SRRG group, that's the Social Recovery Reference Group, project background and objectives, the outputs that we're trying to achieve, a bit about the governance and reporting, the EOI process and question time. So I'd like to start by introducing Catherine Gearing. She's from the National Consultative Disaster Recovery Group. She's been fantastic at putting this EOI together, getting the views of the projects and the different people that we need. And Catherine, I don't know if you want to wave and say hello.
Hello.
There you go. She's there. So she's going to present on the project briefing. And then you've met myself. I'm the Node Research Manager for New South Wales ACT with Natural Hazard Research Australia. Natural Hazard Research Australia is a Commonwealth funded research group. We had 85 millions over 10 years, and we also have contributions from our partners. So the centre opened in July 2021, and we stand on the shoulders of the former bushfire CRC and the natural hazard and bushfire CRC previously. The core objectives of the centre is to protect human life and minimise harm and suffering, to contribute to developing and supporting well-prepared and resilient communities, and to invest in research that translates into action. Now I'm going to pass it over to Catherine because she's the expert on this project. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Rowena. And I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners on their lands in which we meet. I'm joining you from beautiful Biripi country on the New South Wales mid-north coast, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present today. Thanks for coming in and showing an interest in this important work and this project. And I'd also really like to also thank NHRA for their support in this project, which I think we can all recognise is really, really much needed, and really important work that's going to really help communities impacted by disasters. So I am the national consultant with the Social Recovery Reference Group. So this is a group that's actually been running for 40 years. We celebrate 40 years this year. And it's really been established to drive the human and social perspective in emergency management and really promoting the centrality of community in all the work that we do. Its aim is to influence the development of evidence-based policies, plans and programs so that our member partners can really drive better recovery across Australia. We also deploy staff interstate when there's a disaster and one jurisdiction requests assistance from another. And we're an independent advisory group to NZEMSI through CAUSE. And I wanted to show a map of a bit of an idea of giving you a bit of a taste of who we are, the SRG, and who our members are. So it's comprised of the human and social relief and recovery government agencies. And as you can see, most of the states that are there are not predominantly your emergency management agencies. They are more your human and social services in each of the jurisdictions. But that really our member agencies are responsible and do intersect with the emergency management sector, really looking at that social recovery and relief component. And really linking in with emergency and temporary housing agencies. They're either responsible themselves or they partner with those that are. And our member agencies often engage also with other agencies to fund and deliver services on the ground in communities. I really wanted to take the opportunity for giving you a bit of an idea of, this project and what we're wanting to achieve through this project. And I guess trying to give a bit more of the feel of it outside of the EOI or in addition to the EOI. So, we are really basing this on the fact that safe and stable housing is a fundamental requirement for functional and healthy communities. And we know that people are connected to the places that they live, the social connections they have, and the networks around them. Needing to relocate in an emergency or after a disaster really impacts people's stability, employment, education, their well-being, their networks, their supports, and really that important sense of place that people have in the communities that they live. It's extremely disruptive and can be a really difficult time for those that are impacted. So in the last 10 years, we've seen this real increase in the need to support people with temporary housing following disasters. And this has really become such an increasing challenge alongside our national housing crisis that we're facing in Australia. When we started this project and when our members have needed to stand up temporary housing projects, they've looked around and realised that there really is limited research out there. There's a lack of kind of evaluations, guidelines or plans. So it often really results in our member jurisdictions having to develop things as they go, which always adds a huge amount of pressure and also really impacts the deliveries of services that we put on the ground. To understand more on the issue, SRG really wanted to gather more information as to, what had been done before, both internationally and within Australia. And so we looked and commissioned a literature review. And we ended up working with John and Esther from RMIT and developed up, they did some great work on this literature review, which you'll find has now been published. And really what we've done is then we've really utilised this literature review, kind of come back to our members and really sat down and said, based on what's out there, what do we really feel that we're best placed to really drive moving forward? So taking kind of some of that literature review to really identify what we feel is the SRG is kind of a more of a project that we can work with NHRA to really drive and take forward. So the literature review was a foundation for that. So I guess what we were aiming to do is capture real life experiences from both recovery practitioners and our government agencies and others who have been involved in these events, in addition to those community members that have utilised services so far, and really understand some of the different approaches taken and how these approaches have supported that transition to stable housing. So what can we learn from previous disasters? And that's really looking at trying to develop up some case studies of what's been done in the past and how have they worked to establish that support for people. And I guess what we felt we wanted to do was with that research and those case studies, in addition to that, was really gathering information to support and inform kind of at three levels: for community, for the workers, our recovery practitioners or partners that are really working in this space, in addition to really what we need to be doing for our executive leadership audit, some of our decision makers around some of these programs. So that's kind of the three layers of where we're really wanting to take this work. I'm now going to jump into some of the expected outputs, again, which are outlined in the EOI, but really looking at getting a project plan co-designed with our working group, which would capture milestones and our expected timeframes of the project. A research report, and we've focused on 6 state and territories, and they're kind of the 6 that have had temporary housing in kind of projects in the last 3 or 4 years. So really capturing some of the learnings from those, and they're in 6 different locations and contexts. And these are the 6 that we've identified through these projects. And really, we're wanting those case studies to be, really capturing broad consultation with government agencies, including councils, not-for-profit, community members, housing providers, the sector, and the providers. And also, I guess, importantly, where relevant, considering those cumulative impacts that need to be considered as part of these case studies. So how we chose these locations, what we were really trying to do was get a really good mix to really capture, again, considering that human and social focus in the work that we do. We were really looking at trying to capture a mixture of urban, regional, rural, and remote. So in the locations that we've identified, and also really looking at a mix of what were the different approaches that were provided, and that's what were the different social wraparound services that were provided to support the people that were impacted, as well as what was the structural support that was provided through the facilities. And what we were looking at was kind of 4 main areas. So existing government facilities, a bit like a Howard Springs or other facilities that might have been built during COVID that are government facilities that could be utilised. Adapting commercial facilities where the government have utilised a commercial facility locally and adapted it for a housing purpose. And there's examples of that through like Hostel in WA, a closed caravan park that they were able to utilise in Queensland. We're also looking at temporary structures on private land. And what we're looking at here is more like your pods, your caravans, where they're put on people's sites to support them in their rebuild. And then the other part is really those temporary villages that are like flat piece of land, bring on new facilities, build, that infrastructure from scratch and build a village for that temporary purpose. So they're kind of the 4 main components. The other kind of mix we were looking at was kind of really looking at how is this different when you're a renter versus a homeowner? How is this different when you've got different levels of insurance? More communities that perhaps have a high level of insurance versus those that don't. What's some of these cultural components of the communities that we're working and trying to look at a different element of the cultural components, and we've definitely included in that really wanting to understand how services are provided for our First Nations communities, and they are really different to often how things are done elsewhere in the country due to some of the isolated areas of those locations. And then also trying to get a mix of kind of hot and cold climates, north and south. So trying to mix all of these components together to really give us some comparative analysis between programs run, but really ensure that we're really getting a full picture of what's happened in the past. I guess some of the other core outputs that we're looking, like I've said, we really want to look at kind of when we think about the practitioners the people that are working on the ground, resources that can really start to guide how we decide how to do these. What works? What are the really important considerations when you're making these decisions? What are the important considerations you need to do? And I know when we talk to our jurisdictions, everybody's got anecdotal, oh man, don't do that. Oh, it's so important to consider this. Oh, I would have never known, but if we did it again, we'd definitely do this. So it's really trying to capture some of that in something that can be really shared so that when people leave and move on, or a new jurisdiction is impacted, people can capture some of those learnings from previous events. The generic journey maps is really something that kind of is something we're looking at developing based on feedback we've heard strongly from community members, which is this is really hard for community to go through, decision-making processes, approvals, we didn't know where to go. If we'd known the journey at the beginning, it would have been easier. We had no idea what we were kind of in for when we were rebuilding or having to repair our house. So it's kind of trying to line something up that can really give community members a bit of a understanding of what's to come when they're undertaking this path. We've got a couple of examples. One is a rebuild and the other one is a repair. These are both done by Yarra Rangers in events. So there's two different ones here. I just thought they'd be good to show you because they did get some good feedback from the communities around Yarra Valley. These were developed by Yarra Valley Council, a really great council, obviously in Victoria, who have done great work. And so what I really hope this research will do is really hear the community's perspective on what were the barriers, where did they get stuck, what were those barriers to really support them to get back to stable housing, and is there something that community members could have to really help avoid those barriers or make them more manageable in that journey. So I really feel like the research, I'm hoping, will really, and when you're doing the research, really inform what's needed, what will be useful, what might this look like, and kind of really developed out of those needs. There will be a final report that'll be used by government, capturing those lessons, the case studies, observations. There's a bit of an interest for our members on the financial implications of some of the work and whether, what's the perception around that. Identified future research will obviously be really beneficial as well. We also are wanting a bit of a executive brief policy, and this was kind of those three levels that I was referring to, and it's really come back from our members. Often, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes those decisions are made, within government where we really, our members would really like to be able to share something with their government decision makers and say, these are the decisions we want to make and this is the reason why. These are really important considerations. So it's not something really lengthy, but more of a brief that can really showcase good decision making and why some of that would be valuable in those decisions that are made when government decides what implementation to take or what paths to take. The stakeholder presentations will be really valuable, I think, because there's a number of partners that will really, really value this work, and along with those two academic publications. A plain language statement, I think, is really important for accessibility of this information. And again, I know our SRG members are going to be really keen on those progress reports and the project evaluation. And I guess there's lots in that. So I think I just wanted to really showcase and highlight that what we want to achieve from this, which is kind of my near to my end of slides, the next one. Yeah, so governments to be better prepared to establish housing programs. So all that work will, really help us to do that, and really be flexible, adaptable, and responsive to those needs at the community level. There's a real interest for us to improve collective responsibility for wellbeing. We feel like those supports that wrap around the people in that journey are really important to help them navigate that space. So what are the wraparound supports that need to be there to assist people, and really, and in addition to the social supports and those like caseworker supports, what's that kind of navigation through other mechanisms that will really enable people to transition to stable housing. So I think it's really important to consider that is, where do we really want to see the change? Because I think that's what is really driving this project. And I think that's going to be really valuable to really keep it front of mind when developing up the EOI. And I guess just really wanted to hone in a little bit at the end. This is my last slide. But I really wanted to make reference to, when we look at this picture, rather than just looking at the structural parts of temporary housing, which in a lot of ways is kind of the easier part, putting a structure in place for people, what we're really wanting to focus on is that human and social dimension, the families that are impacted by these disasters. And I guess some of the things that when I think about this project, what I've kind of feel would be really valuable to consider is how can we better support people with the right services and guidance and assistance that they need to get into stable housing? How can we really prepare our services to meet the needs of really the mix of communities we have in Australia, and really make sure that the services we provide are adaptable, because we know that the communities that we support are so varied and different. And really importantly, how can we support our decision makers so that they know and really understand the importance of the journey that these impacted residents are going through. And I think for us in government, there's a significant challenge that is also front of mind, is really ensuring that with this housing crisis that we're facing, how can we support people to get back into that stable housing? And how can we do that better? What's the mechanisms that will really enable people to have a better journey through this temporary to stable housing? And I just really want to highlight that I recognise, and we all do, this is really complex. And, especially as we are facing a crisis within Australia, more broadly outside of just our disaster remit. But what I can tell you, and I can guarantee, is that people are listening and people really are wanting to know how we can do this better. There's a real commitment from the sector that we need to make sure that this is done better. And it's been, we've been working really with the Australian New Zealand Emergency Management Committee and the Community Outcomes Recovery Subcommittee to really let them know, this is a priority and they're taking that really seriously. And I know it's going to be part of their future vision nationally. They're really listening and saying, how can we do this better as well? So I think there's a commitment. It's at a numerous levels. And NZEMC goes up to the National Emergency Management Ministers meeting. So at a ministerial level, this is highlighted. So it's a chance really for us to influence this space and make better services, programs and deliverables for those that are impacted and facing a really difficult time in their lives. Thanks, Rowena.
Thank you, Catherine. You can hear the enthusiasm and the commitment to collaboration. And I think Catherine's done a fantastic job. Thank you. NHRA, we are very big on collaboration. As part of your EOI, we'd like to hear how you're going to be involved in collaboration. We definitely want the end users brought along on the journey. They've got important insights to give you into this project. The budget and timeframe for this project is 500,000 to 750,000. The project we anticipate will be done over 3 years, the research delivered in 2 years, and the guidance deliverables in the last year. The governance and reporting, the way we work in NHRA, we have one lead provider for contracting the purposes. So we're happy for you to work across different universities, research organisations, but we will contract it to the one lead agency or university. The contract is between us, and that is NHRA and the university. There will be a project management committee that works throughout the lifespan of the project. That's normally one of the end users, the lead researcher, as well as an NHRA. We have these fantastic communication staff that help out throughout the process as well. There will be a steering committee, which will basically be the SRRG to help run this project or give you the guidance and advice to make sure you're collaborative. There'll be regular meetings. We do expect a project plan. And this is something with the EOI. If you win, basically, we will then work with you to develop the research plan with your ideas to then come up with the final research contract. And it'll be full of the milestones and how you anticipate you're going to deliver this research. There'll be milestones throughout it, quarterly progress reports. We'd like a project evaluation report at the end. And the great thing with NHRA is we love presentations, we love communications. There will be plenty of opportunity to present to your stakeholders. The EOI process, I hope you've downloaded the paperwork from our website. I've given you the link there. For any questions in relation, please don't email me directly, even though I love a social chat and so does Catherine. I'd like you to use the research at naturalhazards.com.au for any questions, because we will post this to our question and answer section so everyone's on the same playing field. Your EOIs are to be submitted to the same email address, research@naturalhazards.com.au by 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, 7th of June, 2024. So for making the submission, this is text taken straight out from the EOI, so I'm not going to read it out for you, but please take note. We've got guidance of how many words, and it's the information that you put in the EOI that we use to assess the EOI. So we do expect you to address each one of these statements that we've written. And we do have a breakdown on a percentage weighting on the research capability, project approach, project outcomes and outputs, industry engagement, and value for money. And we do have descriptions in the EOI for what each of those entails. So at the moment, we're on the 24th of May, the online project briefing. We expect them to be handed in by the 7th of June. We will then let you know. We will notify all the EOI people of the outcome. We have a committee that reviews them all and will come up with their decision. And then that's when you get the chance, if you are the successful applicant, to work up a project plan with the project management committee as well as the steering committee. And we will then follow through with a research services contract. And that ends it. But I would really like to thank you all for coming along. Thank you for your time and your interest in this project. We appreciate the time and effort and the thought that goes into putting the EOIs together. We look forward to seeing your submissions on the 7th of June, but most importantly, we'd like to open it up for people to ask questions. You can pop them in the chat or you can raise your hand now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully we can see you all putting your hands up, either virtually. Okay, I can see Connie, you have got your hand up or you put it down already. Did we answer what you needed? Maybe we did. Anyhow, please ask your questions. This is your chance. You've got both Catherine and myself here willing to help you out. Connie, please go ahead. I've got beautiful Ethel behind the scenes, by the way. In HRA, we have this great team of people that support one another and make things happen.
Thank you. I have a few questions, but the first one is related to, you mentioned about the end user organization. I think I believe Catherine mentioned a few times. So, and there is a recommendation to embed researchers in the end users. Can it be clarified a little bit?
I sure can. So what this is we would love researchers to understand how government works a little bit more. So an example would be New South Wales reconstruction. So if your researcher had a chance, they could actually go and spend the odd day working, sitting at a desk right next to Catherine and hearing how that industry works. There's also opportunity for your postdocs to actually be employed by NHRA to go and work from reconstruction just for like a 3-month period. So it's a bit like a work experience process. There's also the collaboration processes where it will be part of the quarterly meetings, the project management committee. So there's lots of different ways of doing collaboration. But yeah, we do want you to work in it. And the thing is, it's a nationwide group, SRRG, so it will depend where the person comes from as to which agency you're more likely to work in closer with.
This was submitted through the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority on behalf of the SRRG. So we did have to put it through one of our end user, one of the NHRA's end user partners, and that was submitted through New South Wales, but it really was on behalf of all the members of the SRRG, just I guess to clarify that too.
I may have one more question and I will shut up. I got a list of questions, but I asked other people maybe want to have another question. So I think it's quite clear now, the 6 case studies. I think Catherine mentioned about the 6 case study, But in the AOI also mentioned about we need to choose 5 context categories and total minimum 12 case studies. I'm not quite sure how that worked. Thank you.
We were originally looking when we just before we put it finished the AOI, we were looking at 5, but when we met with all the members, we really identified that 6 states really wanted to participate. But what we found was each state had sometimes multiple, they might have done 2 different approaches. So they might have done one approach was caravans on site, the other one for people that didn't have any land might have been in the village, to developing a village. So what we felt was it would be really great to do 2 case studies for each jurisdiction or each event, or a minimum of 2. Maybe you identify that there's a fantastic third one, but the minimum was 2, where you can really showcase potentially 2 different approaches that were done in one disaster, because that's often been the case. One approach doesn't meet everybody's needs, so they often will be doing 2 approaches, and we wanted to try and capture some of that.
Okay, I've got a question from Dr. Hong Xian Li. Shall one EOI focus on one case study, or would it be better to cover more case studies in one EOI? We're actually looking for all the case studies to be covered in the one EOI, but if your research group doesn't feel like they can do a nationwide approach, this is your chance to collaborate with some of the other universities, and feel free to pop in your chat at the moment if you only feel like you could cover one state and you'd be willing to work with another university or another research agency. So we're looking at one EOI that's going to address all of those case studies. Hope that answers your question, Dr. Hong. Please pop in more if you need more feedback on that one. There's another question. Will only one grant be awarded? It's not a grant, it's a research services contract. And yes, we generally only award one grant. Dr. Hung's asked, can the researchers be introduced to the case communities?
Look, we can definitely work with our SRRG partners to identify linkages to the communities. And that will really be part of the work of our working group, the group that will be really supporting you in this work. So we will have one representative on the working group from each of those jurisdictions, and they will really be able to be a linking point for you into those communities.
That process will be after the EOI has been awarded, not before, because we don't want
Yes.
to introduce 50 people to all the communities. That might throw them a bit. But yeah, you'll be amazed. The support you're going to get when you win the EOI, fantastic. The SRRG group is really enthusiastic behind what they would love to achieve and how they can help support you.
I was just wondering, with the EOI, do we need to highlight the 12 case studies we're going to undertake quite clearly, or can we because there's probably
No.
some we've got okay, great.
So you'll be working with the
Yep.
SRRG to choose those case studies.
Right, okay.
So I know
Yeah.
sorry, I preempted what you're saying, but if you already have connections into certain groups, by all means include that in your EOI. So
Okay.
we can take that into consideration. But the actual choice of case studies will definitely be a collaborative effort with the SRRG. The last question, shall the case study only relate to the nominated 6 cases, or would it be better to cover additional cases? It will be additional cases in the end. So it'll be 12 case studies minimum for the research. That was a question from Dr. Hong. Yeah, Catherine gave you 6 examples of the sites that are probably likely to be what the SRRG work on. And that was to give you an idea of costing that, it will be around Australia. It won't just be in one state. Thank you, Hong. Many thanks. That's good. Hope we've answered your questions. Keep the questions rolling. This is your chance, straight from Catherine or myself. Again, I'd like to reiterate, thank you very much for coming.
Sorry.
Sorry, Bressa, do you have a question? Please go.
Yeah, just wondering how important would it be for participation of like a First Nations person? Will it be required, or say we get a First Nations research assistant or research fellow? Is this required as part of the UI, or?
We will be looking at how you intend to interact with the First Nations people. So how you approach that, yeah, definitely. I would recommend it, but it's something that you can put in your EOI as to how you think you could best connect with the First Nations people in the case study, because there will at least be one that involves First Nation people.
Thank you so much. Very
No
informative.
worries. It was a good question, Prasad. Another question, will ECRs as lead or principal investigators be considered? Of course, everyone's considered. Throw your hat in the ring and it will just depend which EOI gets the highest weighting and scoring from our judgment panel. I think if that's the end of the questions, thank you everyone for coming along and look forward to receiving your EOIs.